been searching, though I wasn't looking for much. Checking out the scene, wasn't trying to get my numbers up. You know I keep it cool. I prefer to stay in the cut. Don't want no attention on me when I'm trying to shake the blues up off me. But then I saw your face. It caused my heart to race. Girl, you're looking like $1,000,000. Something about the way you strut your stuff. Oh, girl, you're fine as you wanna. What I'm supposed to do? Something told me got time to lose. Go ahead and bust a move. Funny thing about love, when it comes and goes, you never know. So you gotta keep your heart exposed, and you can be sure there's no cause and no cure. And if it wants you, oh, it'll come and find you. Fall back just a little. Don't wanna lead you on. Don't wanna push a feeling and make the feeling gone. You see, I got your number, but still I ain't used the phone. No, I let it breathe for a minute, baby. Next thing I know, you call. Damn. One thing I know about love, you never know when it's coming, but you sure know it when it does. Yeah. One thing I know about love, you might get what you ask for, so you better be sure it's what you want. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Funny thing about love, when it comes and goes, you never know. So you gotta keep your heart exposed, and you can be sure there's no cause and no cure. And when it wants you, oh, it'll come and find you. Yeah. One thing I know about love, you never know when it's coming, but you sure know it when it does. Yeah. One thing I know about love, you might get what you ask for.
The strange news in brief. I'm Guy Ticker. Study suggests T-Rex 70% larger than previously thought. Mellon and Hone hope their research will lead to more discoveries, even though it appears to have opened a Pandora's box of questions. Summing up this latest contribution to our understanding of the Cretaceous giant, vertebrate paleontologist Thomas Carr states, quote, "This reminds us that what we know about dinosaurs isn't much at all, since the sample sizes are so small. Right now, we are nowhere near the sample size needed, especially when compared to other species of animals." Close quote. I'm Guy Ticker. The Strange News is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet,
Beaming to you like a whirlwind. In syndication and on all the apps worldwide. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Do you remember how great paranormal talk radio was in the 80s and 90s? Night Dreams Talk Radio brings back to you talk radio like you remember, with your host, Gary Anderson, broadcasting to you live from his secret compound deep in the great Northwest. Now, here's Gary.
And here I am. Well, it is the 19th of January. You know, the compound, JC, is so secret. I went to the store last night, and I couldn't find the compound, and it took me an hour driving around to find it because it's so hidden in the mountain.
How hidden is it, Gary?
Is that much hidden? Well, in the news, Calvin Parker again is in the news today. I really am starting to doubt a lot of his stories, I'll be honest with you. Well, it says in the article, a man abducted by aliens 50 years ago was warned about COVID and World War III with Russia. Now, you know, we've had, Calvin on the show numerous times in the past. He has never mentioned anything with COVID. Even when he was sick with COVID, he never mentioned anything of the ETs, ever told him anything about COVID, and never warned him about World War III. Do you remember him ever saying anything, and any time we ever had him on about it?
No, he never mentioned any of those subjects, not a one time, not at all. So that's definitely a new development for sure.
Well, things in ufology, what happens is somebody writes a book or they get a ghostwriter to write their book for them. And, after a while, the book doesn't sell anymore, so they come out with a second book, and then they come out with a third book. And then, again, we've had a lot of guests, and, their stories change each time we would bring them on after they haven't been on for a while.
Oh, that's true. And then there's some of those, they put out so many books, it's like a mill.
Yeah, like 30-some books, and then they get their information off of documentaries and sit down and write a book about it. Well, you know what it is. It's National Popcorn Day. I hope you're sitting in front of your fireplace with your feet propped up and drinking champagne tonight during the show.
Champagne and popcorn. What a combination.
Well, it's something. Well, today we lost a real music talent. I met him twice in my life, and that is David Crossley from Crossley, Stills and Nash died today. He was 81. Boy, he was in ufology. He was deeply in electronics. Great, singer. And that band really, I still, my brain is still in that type of music.
Yeah, they were good harmonizing for sure on some of them songs, definitely.
Well, music wouldn't be where if it is today if it wasn't for bands like that. Well, again, this time traveler is back in the news saying that, well, guess what?
Tell me.
Well, he calls himself champion, and that the Earth is going to be taken over in 2023 by hostile ETs. They're going to come back and reclaim the Earth.
There's always some of these new claims, I'll tell you. It seems like every week there's another one, but this guy's had other ones before. I don't think any's ever come true, have they?
Well, they all were in 2023 prediction.
Yeah.
You think somebody's going to sit there and, say, well, in 2022 and 2022 is up. I mean, come on. Well, Albert Einstein wrote a letter about UFOs. And this is all in resort of what happened over Washington, D.C., July 19th, 1952, when those lights went over the Capitol over Washington, D.C.
That's very true. Matter of fact, that I tell you that really stirred a lot of things up when that happened. Think about if that happened today.
Well, maybe it should. Maybe we need something to settle the world down. I'll tell you that much. But, a lot of people didn't even know Albert Einstein wrote a letter about UFOs.
No, I didn't know it either, so I just learned something new today.
Yeah, he wrote it to the president and to Congress and to the Senate.
I'd like to read that.
Well, it's out there. Well, I'm really upset. We were talking about Mars last week. We were talking about, Mars candy bars and all that. Yeah. Well, evidently they must have heard our show. Nah, it's not true, but I like to think that anyway. They're going to change the packaging, and it's going to be something really different, totally different on all their candies. Something that you wouldn't expect to happen.
Uh-oh. It's going to be shocking, I guess, huh?
Well, maybe they won't call it Mars anymore. Maybe they'll call it Uranus.
No.
You want to eat Uranus candy bars?
I bet it's awful chocolatey anyway.
Hey, did you hear what happened in Arkansas? A guy goes into Arkansas to a Taco Bell. Have you heard that? And he orders 3 bean burritos. And he gets violently sick within minutes. Now, he was in a disagreement with somebody in Taco Bell. But when the manager called the hospital or the ambulance to take him to the hospital, the guy almost died. The police are looking at it as attempted homicide, and they're investigating everybody in that establishment as somebody put rat poisoning in one of his burritos.
That's horrible. Oh, my goodness, Gary. I tell you, you think twice about going to some of these places. My goodness.
Can you believe, and this only can happen in Arkansas, and if the governor is listening in Arkansas, go eat a banana and stick it up Uranus. Now, you notice I didn't say his anus. I said Uranus. I don't want to get another fine from the FCC. Right. I gotten 2 of them here in the mail this last week. A man back over 2 years ago pointed his finger like a gun at a cop. He was arrested. He was booked in jail for attempted murder. Now, he's been sitting in jail for 2 years in Arkansas. He hasn't been up before a judge or convicted of any crime. But he's been sitting in jail. Now, they said he could get out of jail on bail for $1,000. He says, I don't have $1,000. I'm in jail. I have no relatives that can give me $1,000. Could you imagine, though, if you got mad at a cop and you even flipped him off, flipped him off the wrong way? He could say, well, you just pointed a gun at me and you're arrested. Now, can you imagine going to jail for 2 years in a little cell with other people and having to deal with it, and you never pointed a gun at anybody? It was your fingers because you went like this?
No, it sounds like he's got, no lawyers at all, and it sounds like he might already done his time tenfold. My goodness.
Yeah, but I thought, what happens when you're arrested? You have the right to a speedy trial. I guess in Arkansas, you don't have a speedy trial. And I wonder if his fingers were 9 caliber, 38, or a 380 caliber, or 22 or 25.
Or were they registered as deadly weapons? There's something more going on.
Maybe his fingers held a shotgun shell in it, too.
Something.
Crazy. Well, back in 1945, and Roswell, actually in 47, they got it wrong here in the news. But, now the Congress and that the Pentagon and all that is reopening whatever information they can find about Roswell. Now, this, after all these years, who knows where the records are, what happened to them, where they got dispersed to. That's another whitewash.
Well, yeah, right, because most of the people, unfortunately, have passed away since then. I mean, you're talking what?
They all passed away.
Yeah. I know, well, most of them, yeah.
Yeah, anybody that was old enough to know what's anything gone, unless they figured the fountain of youth, they're gone, JC, they're gone.
Well, there might be a couple still left, but yeah, the most of them.
Not anybody would have been old enough to really comprehend what's going on. Okay. Come on, realistic. If they were there in their 20s and you had that, they're gone. I mean, gee. Scientists have figured how to steer lightning bolts by using lasers. For the very first time, they can actually change where the lightning is going to strike by hitting it by a laser.
I'll tell you, I wouldn't want that job. That sounds like playing with fire to me.
Or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, technology is just growing so fast. Well, you remember that, article years ago about they found a hammer encased into a rock, and a lot of people saying that tells you the world has been rebooted.
Oh, yeah, there's many.
Well,
many
here
different
in the
objects.
cell phone, I'll tell you what happens. Okay? Scientifically, this is what happens. If a rock is encased into on granite and it sits there long enough, it starts building like a calcium around it. And it actually will start encasing whatever's in there. So over 40, 50, 60 years, it'll look like, oh, this hammer was in there for thousands of years. In fact, maybe 40, 50 years, it kind of just like grew around it.
Well, that might explain that, but the ones in coal and stuff, there's different objects all over. They're just mind-blowing, though. But I still think we've been rebooted.
Yeah, well, again, to find a good person to work on shoes to get rebooted is really hard.
You got to be a good cobbler, for sure.
Well, in a Dutch village, they're searching for Nazi loot from World War II.
Yeah, every year they're looking for that loot in some village.
Well, in Massachusetts, and only in Massachusetts, well, a couple seen, the Men in Black. And it happened right after the couple saw a UFO.
I'd seen something about that. I tell you, these Men in Black, they've been busy over the years, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. They need to go to Washington, D.C. What are we going to do? Today we hit our debt limit in the country. And the Secretary of Treasury says, well, we can manipulate stuff around. Maybe we can take a platinum coin and make a $1 trillion coin out of it to keep the economy going. In about a week of whatever this is going, no, we're not going to default on our bonds, but they're already looking at different things out there to stop funding now. But yet we can still go another $2.5 billion to Ukraine here today.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Now, figure that out. I mean, here we're sitting there, right? And the Republicans want to abolish the IRS and put a tax on everything you go buy, which I think is more realistic, because if you don't live on much means and you're happy, and you only pay taxes when you buy a new car, you buy a new TV, when you buy an object, you pay taxes on it. It'd be your state taxes. And then your state taxes naturally absorbs your county and your city taxes if you live in the city or, in anything like that. But then it would be a federal tax like the World War II tax that stopped in, I think, early 60s. Think about that. It would abolish the IRS. You wouldn't be audited anymore. They wouldn't need all these auditors. And the rich would finally be paying the money that they actually owe.
Isn't that something? Yeah, of course, there is some of them states, I think there's a handful that doesn't have sales tax. Those are nice to buy things in. But you're right. That's a lot
but
of
you're
taxes.
forgetting something, okay? Like Oregon doesn't have sales tax, but you got another tax. You got a state income tax, buddy. You're forgetting about that.
No,
So what they're doing is, you don't have sales tax, but then they gouge you the other way around. Well, I just think it'd be a lot more logical just to put a tax on everything you buy. And, then you do away with the IRS, and then we would have more money because they would be getting the money from the wealthy that figure out how to beat the taxes. Trump didn't pay taxes for quite a few years, by the way.
Oh, I don't know, but I know a lot of people say so. A lot of people getting away with it. A lot of
people in Congress said it after looking at his tax return. Well, a SpaceX factory is building 5 mega rockets that are huge.
Wow. Okay, so they're getting ready for Mars, men, maybe?
I don't know what they're getting ready for.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, well, maybe they just want to get out a little farther than what they're doing right now. Because, they can get to the space station and come back and stuff like that. Maybe they want to get to the moon and back.
They should. They should try it at least instead of just jumping to Mars. Anyway.
Well, we don't want to go to Mars. I was listening to old Twilight Zone radio show here the other night. We don't want to go Mars because if we go to Mars, do you realize the Martians are about 100 times smaller than us? So, smaller than us, and we're giants to them. But
I think
what happens is another race of humanoids comes and lands on Mars, right? And they're 100 times bigger than us, and they step on us and squish us like we were squishing them. We don't want to go to Mars. We don't want to go. I've seen that. This is a radio show. I know they had it also on the old TV one.
Yeah, once. I did see that. But listen, who knows? You don't know how big these people are or other species.
Yeah. You might be huge. That would make your girlfriend happy, wouldn't it?
Well, I guess so.
I don't know, JC. I really think it would. If you were huge, your girlfriend would say this. Okay. Anyway, moving along here. You know, the other day I got a long email from a young man. Well, he's in his 20s, and his father were in Vermont, and they like going hiking and walking through the maple trees and all this stuff and looking at nature. And they went for the couple-hour hike. When they got back to, the parking lot, they thought somebody was following them for like the last mile or two. They were hearing noises and grunts and groans. They get near the car, and the father turns around and sees this naked guy, kind of. He's about 7 feet tall. He's kind of thin, but he's not quite all human. He noticed the eyes were like glowing red, and then he noticed the head of it wasn't the head of a human. Now, the rest of it, he said, was all human. So maybe they have testicles too, the dogmen. But, here's the point. He said that the dogmen made some noises, and then as they were getting in the car, the father's trying to start the car to back up to get out of there. And this creature is running after him, and he has it in reverse, going as fast as he can. And this creature is throwing big boulders at him, and they're noticing this creature is changing and getting more hairier and more building a physique that it didn't have. Now, I don't know. People talk about dogmen, but, maybe these dogmen are not dogmen. Maybe these things are actually werewolves. Because if you go back, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Germany, Transylvania, and all those places back in history and time, long before they had the internet, long before they had newspapers circulating, they were talking in ancient books about, werewolves.
Oh, yeah. Listen, it goes way back to a lot, Germany, France, and even other countries. But one thing I have found, talking to some of my cohorts, in the dogman field, these dogmen have tails. Werewolves don't. Werewolves are spiritual.
How did they really know? A lot of people that claim they see, poppycock. Well, who's our guest coming up?
Our guest coming up is Stan Gordon.
So we'll be back right after this break with Stan Gordon. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Sale. And don't be like a court, okay? Don't say he says, she says, okay? Unless we have absolutely proof, we don't know.
Yeah, we really don't know.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to own. The space unravels when you let go. What's yours in mine? That energy goes today. The feather in the fire will blow it home your way. Moon mother, open your arms. Moon mother, this magic's just begun. Moon mother, reach for my heart so I can feel your essence in me.
There it is, right in the night sky, the mysterious moon. Constance Victoria Briggs, author of The Encyclopedia of Moon Mysteries, brings us her new book, The Moon's Galactic History, a look at the moon's extraterrestrial past and its connection to Earth. It follows past and present research about the moon's mysterious history, with a focus on extraterrestrial presence. Briggs examines such questions as, are there moon inhabitants? Are the UFOs seen around the Earth today connected to the moon? Is there a city on the moon? And more. The Moon's Galactic History, a look at the moon's extraterrestrial past and its connection to Earth, can be purchased now on Amazon. Also, check out the author's website, www.constancevictoriabriggs.com. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
And we are back with our friend Stan Gordon. How are you doing? It's been a while since you've been on the show, my friend.
Hi, Dave. We're doing well. It's great to be back on the program.
I don't know a Dave. I know a Gary.
Excuse me?
This is Gary. I'm not Dave.
Yeah, Gary. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I know who would Dave. I think you thought I was Dave Scott because I sound as good as Dave Scott.
You both sound very good.
Well, how you been, my friend?
I've been keeping very, very busy. Last year was just an amazing series of events here in Pennsylvania. It was just nonstop UFO, UAP reports, cryptid cases. It was just an amazing time to go through, and we're already starting to get some reports from 2023 coming in.
Well, you know, I got a email from a father and son. I just talked about it here tonight on the show. They were in the forest of Vermont, you know, maple trees. And they like going there when it's not raining this time of year and go hiking in it and, you know, just be out in nature. And what they claimed, Stan, is they were hearing noises as they were walking back to the parking lot to get to their car. And the father yelled at the son. He goes, look at that guy. He's naked. And they then realized the guy had a head of a wolf and that he had a body of a human, at least for a little while. And then the father said that he got really panicky. They got in the car. He shoved it in reverse. This creature started running after them. And then they noticed after this creature was running after him, it started like changing, getting hairy and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And over the years, I've been doing this now over 63 years of research, and I've yet to see a UFO or Bigfoot myself. But I've talked to so many people, and, back in those days of the early 70s, which we talked about in the past, we had that massive UFO Bigfoot outbreak in 73 here in Pennsylvania, and the many strange things that began to show up in the years since then, including a lot of cases in the last several years. And last year, there's more and more indication that the Bigfoot phenomena and some of the other cryptid cases we're working with are much stranger than anybody realizes. I've learned a lot about the Bigfoot mystery. No, I don't have the answers to what's going on. I don't think anybody does. But data continues to suggest, and again, it's not just reports I've had in Pennsylvania, but from all over the country, we're hearing similar reports from other researchers and witnesses that we're dealing with something that has a physical and a non-physical component to it. And it's much stranger than any of us understand.
Do you think it's something that's able to shapeshift?
Well, believe it or not, in the last hour I had another report come in here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail yet because I need to do more interviews with this person, but this is in an area in Pennsylvania, and there's several of them, but this person tells me where they lived for the last few years, and in recent days, they've had a lot of strange activity going on out there, and this person brought up that she's seen creatures change from one form into another. And I've heard this from other people as well. And it's a much more complicated phenomena. I mean, we have many, many cases of Bigfoot. I mean, even in the last few months, of daylight close-range Bigfoot sightings of what appear to be solid creatures. But then in other cases we've had incidents where these things just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. For example, in front of people's vehicles, they walked a short distance and they were suddenly gone. We've had other cases where people could see these things from head to toe, but part of the body was solid and other parts was somewhat transparent or out of focus or misty appearing. And, one of the first things that my teams, when I had my research teams of scientists and engineers, other specialists, starting back in 1970, and during that massive wave of 1973, we got out to many of these locations within minutes to hours after the incidents occurred. So this was all year round in different types of weather conditions, including snow, and we'd have these strange, large, unusual footprints with very large strides between them that would just go for a distance and then just abruptly stop when there should have been more tracks. And that's something that's being reported around the country more and more in recent years. And you might recall the case, I think we talked about it on the show in the past, from February of 74, we're way up in the mountains of Fayette County, which is a very, very active area for these type of reports. This woman heard this noise on her patio, rather in her porch, on her little cabin home. There was something knocking the pop cans around out there, and she thought it was a pack of dogs that had been through there a few weeks before. So she loaded up her 16-gauge double-barrel shotgun to fire over her head to scare the dogs away, and she proceeds to load one chamber of the shotgun. She walks up to the front, opens the front door, turns on the switch for the outside light, steps out, and 6 feet away from her is a 7-foot-tall, huge Bigfoot-like creature. And what does she do? She pulls the trigger, takes a shot. She said there was this bright flash of light, and the creature vanished and disappeared right in front of her. And that was only part of the story.
She is brave to go out there in that circumstances. I don't know if you remember, I saw in the early 2000s a Bigfoot with a friend of mine who was a medical doctor up in the Canadian Rockies, where it was an old Japanese internment camp where they held prisoners during World War II. And I tell you, after I saw one, I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I'd never even had the foggiest idea if they were real or not. I've had people talk about it on my shows back then, but I just didn't believe it. But after seeing one, I don't know what it was. It wasn't a bear, and it was not anything I ever seen that looked like that ever before or after.
And, I deal with these cases quite often. I get many reports in here from current and past reports all the time coming in. My hotline's been open since 1969. It never stops ringing. So between email and phone reports, I get a lot of calls. And I'm in touch with many other researchers who are getting reports as well. And, so many of these people I've interviewed over the years, outdoorsmen, hunters, first responders, I mean, you name all kind of backgrounds of people. So many of these people had never seen anything like this before. And for many of them, it was a life-changing experience because so many of these guys have been out in the woods for years. They used to laugh about these stories until they had their own encounter. And I'm telling you, some of these people I've been in touch with for years and years, and their life has still changed from that episode when they encountered these creatures.
Well, it does. I still have nightmares. I mean, I just opened my eyes up. We're not the only humanoids walking this earth. A good friend of ours on the show is Christopher George, who's a retired law enforcement park ranger, federal park ranger. And he also said that, one time he saw Bigfoot prints in the snow and they followed it. And then it went, maybe a couple hundred feet, and then it just stopped. And there was no sign where it turned around. It's just like it went there and then vanished.
Yeah, and again, this is something I've been dealing with these cases. I started writing about these, Gary, back in the 1970s. And back then there was a lot more ridicule than there is today. But, there's always been many people in the Bigfoot field were very reluctant to accept some of these reports. But I can tell you, in more recent years, these cases are coming in from all over the country. And more researchers are experiencing things themselves that they cannot explain, especially the tracks that just suddenly stop when there should have been more tracks. And these other reports, and what is really fascinating now, and I don't know if you saw the report that I sent over to you a couple days ago, that concerns all this phenomena last year. But among the many different types of reports coming in, again, we had many daylight sightings of large cigar-shaped objects, or tic-tacs, as the Pentagon seems to like to call them, large triangular objects, rectangular objects, but most importantly, and really interestingly, are the reports that are coming in of what I've called mini UFOs for years. And I've been aware of them since the 1960s. And I've wrote about these over the years many times, but it was unprecedented, the wide range of reports from widespread areas last year. And these objects, now let me try to explain these to you. They range anywhere from a few inches in diameter, so they're like the size of large fireflies. Many of them are commonly about the size of a baseball or a golf ball. Some are about a foot or two in diameter. They're generally spherical, but not always. They're quite often just light sources of various colors, and in some cases we had where they were close to people and they looked solid and metallic. But what's intriguing is, over the years I've had reports of these things pacing vehicles and entering cars through open windows, entering people's homes through open windows, sometimes going right through the walls. But some of the cases this year are just amazing, because we're getting reports in daylight of these objects coming within feet of people. And some of these cases, which I'll be glad to relate some of these accounts to you, some of these cases are just amazing.
Now, these people who are claiming that these objects are coming near them, are they feeling anything? Are they getting any vibrations from them? Any thoughts? Anything on that? Or, you know, what are they saying other than that object is near them?
Well, and there's some variations in it, but I can tell you two of the cases that happened within days of each other, miles away from each other, that, and I can go over some of those reports with you, but in both cases, now these people don't know each other, and one of the cases was investigated, and some of these cases are up in Fayette County. So some of these reports are investigated by a fellow named Jim Brown, who's a really high-tech researcher, has a lot of high-tech instrumentation out there. I've been involved with Jim investigating cases with my research group years ago. But anyhow, so here's one case. This was this just occurred October 8th of last year. And this fellow awakened around 6 o'clock in the morning. It was cold outside in the 40s at the time. He just had his pajamas and slippers on, as I recall, from Jim's report. And he decided to go out early in the morning to read the newspapers. He was walking out towards the box, the newspaper box, and he said he was about 50 feet away from the porch to the paper box, and that's when he sees this glowing ball of white light, about 10 to 12 inches in diameter, that was between him and the paper box. And he said at that point he told his wife that he got extremely sleepy. Now here's what's interesting. She gets up around 7 o'clock in the morning. She's looking for her husband, doesn't see him, and she goes up and she finds him outside on the porch in his pajamas in that very cold weather, sound asleep. And all he could remember was he saw this sphere of light kind of moving in a circular slow motion. He became extremely tired, and he fell asleep, and that's how she found him. And then a few days later, about 40 miles away up in the Laurel Highlands, so this is now between the Chestnut Ridge and the Laurel Ridge area, which are high active areas historically for a lot of ongoing anomalies, from cryptids to UFOs to these balls of light below the ground, all kind of other paranormal stuff. It's amazing stuff going on out there. This woman's awakened about 2:30 in the morning. She goes to the restroom. Comes out of the restroom about 5 feet away in her living room. Now, these are old homes, very high ceilings. She sees this object, a deep blue-colored sphere, about 1.5 feet in diameter. And she said she can see within the sphere like a gray swirling mass that looks similar to like the motion of a lava lamp. And the object was solid as it moved slightly up and down. She recalled taking one step towards it. That's when she felt like a slight tingling sensation. And then she said it was like a pre-jolt of electricity when you're near an electric fence. And she said she looked at the thing for about 10 seconds and suddenly became very, very tired. And she immediately went into the bedroom and went to sleep. But she said to me the next day, she said, I was very sluggish and very groggy, but she said, what I did is not like me. She said, I'm an insomniac. I can't fall asleep that quickly, and why that happened, she doesn't know. So there were two cases right there where the same kind of reaction was reported by the witness who was very close to these spheres.
Very interesting. And do any of these people ever feel threatened when these spheres or orbs or whatever these things are?
I can't say threatened, but curious, and like they're trying to figure out what are these things. You know, why are they seeing them? Why are they around a property? So what's interesting is you're getting reports not only from wooded, forested areas. We're also getting reports from more I'd say, somewhat urban areas and housing developments that some security cameras have been picking up, some game cams have been picking them up. Unfortunately, a lot of what we're seeing, there's something on there that's just not real detailed. Most of this is at night. So, I mean, some of these cases are just really, really intriguing. And then there was another case that happened in June. I just interviewed this witness more recently. It was just reported. But this happened way up north in Tioga County. And this area, part of it is known as the Black Forest region of Pennsylvania, which has a long, long history of all kind of paranormal and cryptid activity up there. But this fellow, he got up early in the morning between midnight and 1 a.m. He went into the kitchen, he looked out the window, and he had a well-lit driveway. And the car was parked in the driveway, which is about 12 to 15 feet away from where he was standing. And he said that's when he noticed this unusual object was on the ground about a foot from his parked car. Now, you can go to my website, or your viewers can go to my website, stangordon.info, and see the recent report, and you can see this really great sketch that this gentleman was able to provide. And he said it was round, solid-looking, beige or white in color, about the size of a basketball. It had a surface like polished wood, but it appeared to be luminous but not real bright, did not reflect any light. It did, however, cast a shadow. And by the way, in a lot of the reports I'm hearing from people, even where some are very bright, they do not seem to be emitting any light to the surrounding area. But here's what he also said, which you can see in the sketch. He said there were some other protuberances connected to the object. He said it was like a long, flat, wing-like plank running through it, like from back to front. On the opposite side, there were like spikes sticking up and going back. The object did not move or make any sound. And, I mean, that's just an example of some of these strange reports coming in. And they were coming in from such widespread areas of the state and from so many different people in different areas that didn't know about this going on. And very, very intriguing. And then there was another incident happened earlier last year in an area that has a lot of ongoing phenomena. A lot of ongoing from Bigfoot activity, UFOs, Bigfoot, the balls of light. But this was a really intriguing evening when this was going on earlier in the year. And you had a number of very experienced outdoorsmen, Bigfoot researchers up there. And I had talked to some of these fellows who know me pretty well about these spheres of light. They've been seeing them for years, especially in more recent years in Pennsylvania and around the country in areas that have a lot of history of Bigfoot encounters. And many researchers are aware of it. Other witnesses are aware of it, of these small spheres of light that are coming into the wooded area and coming quite close to people. But in this location, when this happened, some of these small spherical objects were coming within feet of some of these researchers who I know were very skeptical of the reports. Well, from what I was told, what happened that night, they were quite alarmed, and a lot of them, I think, had a life-changing experience.
Oh, I would agree with that. You know, in the news, I don't know if you saw that, last week, Russia claims they shot a UFO down. It was like a basketball in the sky, and they took it out with a missile. Did you see that?
I have read it, but again, you know, I've been doing this a long time, so have you, and you know, we've got to be a little skeptical of these reports until somebody really gets out there, investigates them, and find out, you know, what is accurate. And it sounds like a very interesting story. I'd like to know more detail.
I wish they would give us more, but they don't give us that information. But it makes me wonder, like even like in TikTok with what was going on there, I think we are being visited by something. I don't know if they're drones or whatever they are. Well, I just don't know what they're trying to get. But could you imagine you just come out of your bathroom, you're walking into your living room, and here's one of them, up by the ceiling. That would be so alarming.
Well, let me tell you about one that happened April 6th of last year, also up in Fayette County. Researcher Jim Brown investigated. He was on the scene within 45 minutes after it happened. So this is in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Weather is fine. There's no storms around or anything like that. We're not talking about ball lightning in these cases. And a man and his wife, they're outside doing gardening work. They're digging topsoil. They have a wheelbarrow out, and they notice about 50 feet away, they see this bright silver circular object slowly moving in their direction. It's only about 10 feet above the fence, and it looks circular, about 2 feet in diameter. It's bright, and they thought at first it was a Mylar balloon. And as it drifts closer to the location, they realize it's not a Mylar balloon. In fact, it physically gets much brighter. And then as it gets within a few feet of them, it suddenly explodes. But when they said explode, they said it was like a small lightning bolt shot from the object, from the explosion to the ground. The explosion sounded like a small firecracker, like a snap, like a spark. The spark started a small fire in the field that they immediately put out. And as they're looking at this thing, it's gone. So they notice about 100 feet away, there's another small fire that was along the path that the object had taken. So they got a hold of Jim Brown. Now, Jim comes out there with all kind of high-tech equipment, and he's figuring, well, if it's a firecracker, a Mylar balloon, there's going to be a lot of residue out here. There was absolutely nothing at the scene. He searched everywhere. He checked all the fences, the wiring and everything. Whatever it was, he couldn't find an explanation for it, which Jim is very open-minded but skeptical, very scientific, and he was somewhat baffled by the fact that there was no residue at the scene.
That is interesting. What do you think they are? I mean, you get all these reports and you research it the best you can, but what do you think is going on?
Well, when I first heard these reports back in the 60s, and over the years I began to hear more of them, I was of the opinion at that time there was some type of probe that was sending back audio and visual data to someone or something. But over the years now, these reports have gotten much, much stranger. And as strange as it sounds, and again, I'm not the only one who had these reports. We've heard reports of these balls of light that actually physically change into creatures. And, you may recall, I think long ago, we talked about one of the incidents happened during the 1973 Bigfoot outbreak when all these strange cases began to come to my attention. And that's when I began to realize there's a lot more to Bigfoot than we understand. And when you hear some of these reports, Gary, I'm not suggesting that Bigfoot is riding or a passenger in a spaceship from another planet, because we don't know what we're dealing with. For lack of a better term, I say something is interdimensional. There's a physical and non-physical component. But in that 1973 report, you had two witnesses out in the country waiting for a friend to pick them up. They see this 7, 8 foot tall Bigfoot with white hair running across the road, but it's carrying a small ball of light in one of its hands. And a short time later, this object came across the sky, projected a beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into. That's just an example of some of the cases I've been dealing with. And then a few years ago, in Allegheny County, so this is a rural area outside of Pittsburgh. This was around 1 o'clock in the morning, 2019. This fella gets up and he looks out his back window. So the back area goes into a large wooded area, but it's very well lit out there. And he sees this smaller Bigfoot, about 4.5 to 5 feet tall, covered with dark hair, long hair on the head and the back area. It's walking on two legs, and the arms are down to the knees almost. He could see the arms swinging. You got a good look at it. He said it moved quite fast with long strides, and it moved into this one particular section to enter the woods. He said about 3 seconds later, after the creature had gone into the woods, at that same exact location, a bright sphere of light, about 3 to 4 inches in diameter, suddenly appeared. He said it was similar to looking directly into the flashlight, about 4 feet above the ground. The light then moved a short distance and vanished. A few seconds later, though, the light reappeared about 10 feet away, and this time that small sphere emitted a bright beam of light about 10 to 12 feet long. It soon vanished, and that was all we saw. But we keep hearing these reports of these spheres of light, these unusual, sometimes bright flashes of light that are being seen in the woods in areas of Bigfoot activity or where these other phenomena are taking place.
That is really interesting. You know, again, like Amicho Kaku, who's been on our show, he's stressed that there is a possibility that portals do exist, and maybe these creatures are able to go into another dimension and come back, because we're also close to cracking another dimension where these things would be, physically here. So, I mean, maybe they have that capability to come into our dimension. I don't know what it is, but I tell you, there's been a lot of sightings with orbs and what you're talking about with Bigfoot, dogmen, and other cryptids.
Yes, and we've had so-called dogman reports here for years and years. It's really nothing new. If you may have read my book, Silent Invasion, about that massive wave of Bigfoot and UFO strange case in '73. Well, during that time, there were a lot of so-called typical Bigfoot reports, 6 to 9 foot tall, your typical description, but there were some variations. Some were taller and thinner. Some were smaller and more muscular. But then I had some cases where people were, when I say within feet, I'm saying within 5 feet. And they were able to look directly at them, got a really good facial description, talking about seeing the face more like a wolf or a dog, quite often luminous red glowing eyes, fang-like teeth. Let me tell you one case I remember really well. I got the call early in the morning. I think it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. This was August, September of '73, out in an area between Greensburg and Jeanette. The location where this happened, the home was very low foundation to the ground. This person was visiting her friends out there, and she got up during the night, go to the restroom. So she's sitting there directly in front of the window. She's hearing these odd sounds outside, and suddenly this thing rises up and is looking directly at her face to face through the window. And she's described in detail the face, the nose, the teeth, the eyes, and she was hysterical. And she went screaming out there. They called the state police. The state police connected her to me. I was able to interview her soon after it happened. She was so frightened that she made her friends take her from there to her home several miles away. But here's the kicker, and this is something you rarely hear about, but I have other incidents like this. Within the hour, the same or another creature showed up at her home.
You mean from a different location?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, within the hour, they went several miles to her home to take her back to her house. Within the hour at her home, a similar or the same creature showed up.
Well, Bigfoot sightings are actually on a rise again here in Washington State. Last week, Washington Cam up in the mountains, they said they got another image of a Bigfoot.
Oh, well, we've been getting them year after year. I mean, there have been Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania every year since 1973. And last year, some of the reports were extremely detailed. One, which happened very recently, this would have been November of last year, November 9th. Now, this is in the area, again, very wooded, very rural area. This would be between Westmoreland County and Indiana County, up on the Chestnut Ridge again, where there's been a lot of sightings. And I interviewed this person within hours after it happened. They contacted me, and it was just early in the morning. The sun was just coming up, and this woman was coming out of one of the buildings on the property, and out of the corner of her eye, she caught some movement, turns to look, and she said, about 80 feet away, here's this huge 9-foot-tall, hair-covered creature with gray hair carrying a small deer over its right shoulder. And she said she thinks she may have scared it because as soon as it saw her, it let out a very loud grunt. And she said the creature made eye contact with her. It was covered again with gray hair. The arms were very long, hung down to at least the knees. The ears looked human. And there was gray hair on the face. But she noticed no smell, and there is not always a smell. You hear people talk about this terrible odor. There is not always a smell in some cases. But she said the creature looked at her, turned, and moved off through the field into the woods and was gone.
Now,
and that's an area now for the last few years. Other people are reporting daylight Bigfoot sightings, footprints in the snow. I've been up there many, many times over many years investigating sightings all through the ridge.
What are they describing? What their face looks like on a Bigfoot? Can you let the listeners know what the actual report? I mean, how many of them match with other reports on what the face looks like?
There's a lot of similar reports. You know, the head is. It depends on one thing. That's very common is most of them report no neck or very slight neck. That's very common. One of the other traits is very common is the arms are so long. These things are bipedal. Sometimes they kind of move stooped, but the arms are so long they hang down past these, and sometimes almost down to the ground. Those are two really specific things. Some of the people who have been close to them have talked about the fang-like teeth. Now, the eyes, it varies. In some cases, they describe them about the size of a 50-cent piece. People have been close to them. Sometimes they're very, very black. But in other cases, and again, so many reports of the eyes on dark nights where there's no moon, there's no reflective light, there's no artificial light in the area, that these eyes are self-luminescent glowing. Bright red, reddish orange, green, yellow have all been reported. And so there's variations, but a lot of similarities in reports. You've got to remember now, some people have seen these things very close. Others have seen them under different weather conditions, different angles. So there's variations in the reports.
Has anybody described them as looking like an ape minus the hair with a larger cranium and human-like eyes but larger and frankly just ugly as hell?
Yeah, we've heard them all. And again, a lot of these people describe these things. Some is more ape-like, others say they're more human-like. Again, there's a lot of similarities in the reports, but again, it depends on various factors, how close they were, what they got to see. Let me just tell you about another case that happened just a few years ago, and this was down in the Mon Valley area, outside of Pittsburgh, down along the Mon River, the Monongahela River area. For years and years, there have been incidents all through that area. Of Bigfoot sightings, UFO encounters. For years I've been down there. This happened a few years ago, and this fellow it was a rainy night, as I recall. The fellow's riding down this back road, this rural road. He notices something on the left side of the road standing there. He puts his lights up, and here's this huge 7-foot-tall Bigfoot that walked out directly on the road, directly in front of him. And he got a really good look at this thing. And anyhow, he's looking at this thing. He said this thing has glowing red eyes and just stared at him. And he described this thing from head to toe. And he said this thing turned, and there was like a little embankment there across the road, and this thing turned and started with its big stride, started running up the road. He's directly behind it in his vehicle with his camera loaded to try to take a picture. And he told me, I can't understand this. He said, it was right in front of me in my headlights, and then it was gone. He said, I don't understand how it could possibly have moved out of my vision that quickly as I'm ready to take a picture. It was just gone. And that's something, again, we hear these kind of reports all the time. These things seem to have the ability to come when they go, they're here and they're gone. And again, I told you about the lady shot at one with a shotgun. There was a bright flash of light. And the rest of the story was, after she fired at that creature and it disappeared in the flash of light, her in-laws lived 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot, and they called her and asked her what she was shooting at. She tried to explain it to him. Her son-in-law grabbed his sidearm, started walking up that dark road, and apparently right around that time, said he was surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, started shooting at them randomly. And about the same time, there was this large luminous object, they said like a big Christmas ornament, hovering over the woods at the same time.
That is scary. I will say this from my encounter. I noticed the creature, whatever it was, it didn't, how we have movement with our head and neck. They don't appear to have as much movement with their being able to turn their head. They actually have to turn their torso along with it. I mean, they can turn their head a certain level, but not like the movement that humans have. That's what I noticed. Has anybody else said anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I've heard many stories. I've heard so many stories. Gary, I probably have forgotten more now than I remember, and I still remember quite a lot of them. And there's a lot of and it's not just Bigfoot case I'm dealing with here. I'm dealing with all kind of strange entity reports, creature reports. I'm just trying to think of some that in particular you might be interested in, but I will get down to that. There was, here's what I wanted to tell you. That the Black Panther reports, we have already had some in the last few years again, and these are more of out-of-place animals. So when we're thinking about Black Panthers, we're thinking about an animal, a jaguar, a leopard, more common to other parts of the world, not here in Pennsylvania, but these reports have come in for years all across the country here in the United States where they shouldn't be. But anyhow, here's the correlation I found. Sometimes in certain locations, when you have an outbreak of these various phenomena, sometimes more than one cryptid appears. And for example, back in 1979, I think in 81, 82, on the border of Westmoreland, Armstrong County, this went on for months and months and months. As I recall, it began in the summer of 79 when an object fell from the sky into a big wooded area, and the residents began to hear screams and cries, these strange lights in the woods. They saw these small balls of light, and they were seeing Bigfoot. And it then continued, got more intense in 81 and 82. But when they were having all these Bigfoot sightings, they were having Black Panther sightings as well. And something you rarely ever hear about, but there are occasions where a Bigfoot accompanies another cryptid at the same time. But let me tell you a Black Panther story that you may never have heard before, which suggested to me that some of these cases seem to fall in the same category as some of these very strange Bigfoot reports. Would you like to hear that story?
Well, we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, why don't we cover this after the break?
Sounds good, Gary.
Okay, we'll be back in about 4 minutes with Stan Gordon, so stay tuned. Do Bigfoot exist? Do dogmen exist? I don't know. I saw something, and unless it was my ex-mother-in-law up in the Canadian Rockies, I don't know what it was. But, every day we're finding more things out about our Earth that we did not know it even existed. So we'll be back with Stan after this break. Everybody, we'll catch you in a minute.
you like the weird and unusual? Martin Eddington is the author of over 140 strange and unusual books. He's an engineer who has an analytical perspective and writes about his paranormal experiences and his research and conclusions on strange topics. Book categories include longevity, immortality, the paranormal, spirituality, aliens and UFOs, time and dimensions, ancient history, legendary beings, strange science, self-help, and much more. Learn the details about all these books by Martin Eddington and purchase them at his website, www.mkeddingtonbooks.com. That's MKETTINGTONBOOKS.com. These great, strange, and unusual Martin Eddington books are also available on Amazon. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
We are back with Stan Gordon. Okay, well, let's hear this one that, I'm sorry I had to interrupt you, but we had to have that break.
Sure, Gary. Well, this was a really interesting case going back to February of 1983. And this occurred way up in the mountainous area here in southwest Pennsylvania. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. This guy's getting home. It's very cold, and his car's overheating. Pulls into his driveway and gets a can of antifreeze. He opens up the hood, and he starts putting the antifreeze in the car, and a short time later, he hears this loud growl. And he turns around to look, and about 20 feet away, there's this large black house cat just sitting there staring at him and growling at him. Well, he didn't think much of it because there's out in that area is a lot of stray cats. He goes back to putting more antifreeze in the car, and a few minutes later, he hears the second growl, but this time the sound of the growl is much deeper and much louder. And he's shocked when he turns around because now that large house cat has physically grown to about twice its size. And the man reacts by throwing that empty antifreeze jug at the animal, which he hits. It growled fiercely at him as though it was going to attack him, and took several steps and turned around and starts walking outside along the illuminated roadway going outside of the house. The fellow runs into his home to grab his pistol, and said when he came out, he said he looks outside and he couldn't believe it, that this animal had now grown physically to the size of an animal like he saw in a zoo. He said like a black panther. It was completely solid black with yellow glowing eyes. The body was about 2 to 3 feet long, and the tail was swishing around about as long as the body. And he took a shot at it, but he didn't know if he hit it. And he said moments later, as he's watching it, that creature suddenly vanished and disappeared in the thin air and was gone.
That is what is unique. Again, even like with Dogman reports and Jaguar reports, again, we've even had those in Washington, which that doesn't make sense. But I mean, again, in my mind, Jaguar, I always thought Africa, and places like that. But I just don't know what these are. Are they something maybe in a different realm, that maybe are not anything like we even comprehend? I just wonder if they're able to shapeshift from a Bigfoot to a Jaguar to a Dogman to other cryptids.
And that's very rarely talked about, but there have been reports over the years of exactly what that is happening. I mean, I've talked to people who swear they've seen creatures change from one creature to another. I know there were other researchers over many years that have talked reluctantly about these type of reports. It's very strange. There are so many strange reports that I deal with and others, from the Thunderbird sightings to, and I'll give you an idea in a few minutes about some of these other reports. The whole thing is this, Gary. You cannot possibly have so many unknown species of creatures out there. Yet at the same time, you have so many credible people from widespread areas that don't know each other, giving myself and other researchers very similar accounts. I look for details, and I get those little details from people that match up. And so many of these cases, they wouldn't have known what happened unless they experienced it themselves. And that's what I look for. So there's some other answer to this. And the only thing that makes any sense is whatever these things are, they're here and they're gone. They come and they go. Like I said, for lack of a better term, I'll call it interdimensional. There's people who swear to me they've seen some type of opening, portal up on the ridge and other areas. And, again, I don't understand it. I don't think anybody understands it. I think the government is aware of it, but I don't think they have the answers either. And I think this is a much more complex phenomenon. So let me give you an example of just another type of really weird cryptid that I've been involved with for quite a while now, and very similar reports that come in from around the country in more recent years. So in August of 2017, this is here in Pennsylvania, this is a police officer on patrol. And he had been patrolling this rural area for years. And on this particular evening, he's riding down the road, and he sees this very dull white ball of light on the ground. And this is not to get confused with what we've been talking about. Anyhow, he's looking at this ball of light, and suddenly it rises up. And he realizes that this ball of light is actually the head of a strange being that looks to be about 6 feet or taller. He said it was tall and almost skeletal thin. It was basically, it had no hair, it was hairless. He said he was of the opinion when he first saw it that it was lying on its belly on the ground with its head facing towards the road. It then stood up facing the road. In that dark location, he saw the dull light from the glowing head illuminating the upper sections of the body. He watched the creature turn to the right. He said it then turned and faced him, then turned to the left and took off with incredible speed. And he said he assumed it ran, but he said he had never seen anything move so fast in his life. And here's what he said. It was there and then it was gone. And that is so similar to what some Bigfoot witnesses tell me as well. And he said he described this thing about 6 feet or taller. The head was about 8 to 10 inches in diameter, shaped like a ball. But he said it could have been a little more egg-shaped as well. The light emitted seemed to be just a dull white. It illuminated the shoulders, the top of the chest, and the section of the arms. He could not see the hands. The chest looked to be about 18 inches across. The waist appeared to be small, but the arms were unusually long. The long limbs looked skeletal and with no muscle mass. The skin tone appeared to be kind of a grayish-blue color, and he couldn't see any facial features. He said the whole episode only lasted about 10 seconds. It was gone. He pulled his vehicle up, shined a spotlight on the area, but he saw no tracks or anything. So that was interesting. Within, I believe a few weeks later, another report came in from another area. Other reports came in over the years. And then a really interesting report was from, I guess about maybe 25, 30 miles from there in the fall of 2018. So this fellow, his home is in the woods. He lives in the woods. He works in the woods. He knows deer and the animals around there. And it was one evening that he began to hear some unusual sound in the woods, and he knew it was not deer, and it sounded a little unusual, so he kind of left the woods, went down to his home. So he's sitting there. He goes in the kitchen. He's sitting there at the dining room table, which I saw it. I was there. He was only about 5 feet from the back door. So this big back door there's no obstruction. There's no curtains on it. It's just glass. And here he sees this creature, this humanoid-shaped being, with his hands and his knees down, staring directly at him. He said it looked like a skeleton covered with all gray skin. It was down on his gray, bony legs. The legs looked similar to the back legs of a greyhound dog. The arms were longer than normal, bony and hairless. The head was round, the neck was small. The head appeared to be right on his shoulders. The mouth was closed. The eyes were glowing a dull yellow color. He estimated this creature was standing about 6 to 7 feet tall. He could see its spine protruding as it moved. And he said he was stunned, and he watched this thing. It was down on all fours like a dog, ran along the side of the house, and that was the last he saw of it. That's just similar to some of the reports that I was receiving, and then I began to hear other researchers reporting similar reports from around the country.
You know, that is really scary when you hear this stuff. Stan, here about 2 weeks ago, a trucker, ran into what he claimed a dog man. And he got out of his rig, and the dog man, supposedly charged at him. he was scared. He remembered he carried a gun because your brain goes into a shock for a few seconds. He pulled the gun out. He said he shot it in the eye, and then he got back into his rig. And then he drove off, and then he realized, I got to have proof on this. And he went back, and it was gone.
Well, that's the whole thing. We go out and investigate these cases. If I'm not able to, some of these other researchers get out there, and sometimes you find some physical evidence, but in a lot of the areas where there should be more evidence, there isn't, or these things just suddenly, they're gone. And there's so many different type of reports. Another case I was involved with years ago is a case that's become pretty well known. They call it the Butler Gargoyle, for a better term. This is north of Pittsburgh in Butler County. There's been a lot of activity up in that county for years, going back to at least the 1960s with Bigfoot, cryptids, UFOs, all kind of weird phenomena. But anyhow, this occurred back in early morning hours of March 18, 2021. This was between the towns of what they call Chicora and East Brady. I've interviewed this witness many, many times. I got to know him very well. He's a professional person. He was driving down the road early morning hours when his headlights hit something on the right side of the grassy area ahead of him. He thought at first it was a deer. But as he gets closer, this thing was hunched down and stood up. It was very tall and muscular looking. It took 3 big steps and went across the road. And he told me when I interviewed him the first time, he said, I've heard people talk about seeing a Bigfoot. He said, this was not a Bigfoot. He said, this thing was at least 8 foot tall. And by the way, it walked in front of like a big sign, a road sign. The road sign was around 8 foot tall. This thing was a little taller. And he said the creature never looked at him. He only saw it from the side. But he said it was covered with something like a smooth, leather-like skin that was either darker tan or a light brown color. And he said the head appeared to be flat in the front, then rounded out, something like an aerodynamic helmet. The face was flat. The eyes were not clearly defined, but he said it may have been like pointed. And the ears were observed in the left side was long and flat, came up to the back and pointed backwards like a flap. The arms were muscular and a little longer than that of a human. The hands had claws, and he said the one trait that really stood out was extremely muscular legs. But he said the legs were hard to explain. They did not move like that of a human. They looked like they bent backwards. And he said it appeared to have wings on its back, which were tucked into its body, with the wingtips extending toward the side of the head. And he got a very good look at this thing. Within days, a number of other people in that same area were reporting to Dan Hagman at the Butler Research Group up in that area. And some of those reports were very, very similar as well. One case was near a town called Reimersburg. And there were several people, 2 witnesses in a car near the ice cream stand up there. They saw this thing within 35 feet, and they said this thing was at least 9 foot tall, had dark brown skin, long arms, broad shoulders, had a pointed head, pointed ears, what appeared to be wings on its back. The body was very muscular, and there were 4 finger-like claws in each hand. The eyes were squinted but swept upward in the corner. The movement of the arms were not normal. The mouth looked like a slit. The wings looked like see-through mesh, resemble wings like on a bat, he said. And he said the claws were black as coal, and he said this thing came straight from hell.
Is that like a Mothman?
Well, some similarities, but not exactly the same. There's some similarities. And, I've talked about this. I've read about this in the past. In my new book, I actually go into it. But when the Mothman phenomenon was going on in neighboring West Virginia back in November of '66, I'm about 30 miles from Pittsburgh. I was hearing rumors that something similar was being seen in the Pittsburgh area. And I tried for the longest time to track it down. It was many, many, many years later that I came across a witness who was involved in one of these things. But then years later, I came across another person who was best friends with a witness to another incident involving this creature who just gave a miraculous account. And this guy was terrified, and this guy was nearly in shock. He came to this fellow's house who talked to me soon after it happened. And he gave me the whole story that I put actually in my new book, Creepy Cryptids. There are so many weird things going on out there. People have no idea.
What is the most scariest cryptid you have heard about?
Oh my gosh, there is so many strange and unusual cases. I mean, we have the huge flying Thunderbird sightings. The Bigfoot stuff is very intriguing. But you know, with the Bigfoot reports, in the hundreds of people I've interviewed, and many in daylight, many close-range daylight sightings here in Pennsylvania, as all these different witnesses told me, the hunters told me, that if these things wanted to hurt them, they could easily outpace them, they easily could hurt them. That's not what they seem to want to do. They seem to be curious of human activity. At times they'll throw pretty good-sized tree branches or small boulders in the direction of people, but for them to go after somebody and actually physically hurt them, I can't think of any case I've been involved with where that happened. That does not seem to be the case here. But I've heard so many strange reports over the years, I couldn't even begin to tell you. Of course, the case that stands out, and I wouldn't say the scariest, but most intriguing case was that famous case I investigated during the massive UFO wave and Bigfoot wave in 1973. That's the incident happened October 25th, 1973, up in Fayette County. I got a call about 10:30 at night from a state trooper from the Uniontown Barracks who just investigated the incident. He felt that there may possibly be something still up on the farm. He asked me if I could get my team up there as soon as possible. Well, we did. It was already late. We assembled a team. We got our cameras, we got our radios, our radiation meters, other equipment, and found our way up there and spent most of the night up there. It's way too long of a story to get involved in now because I know you don't have much time, but that involved multiple witnesses that observed this huge 100-foot diameter in the sky was a big sphere, but as it gone on the ground, it became a big white dome, about 100 feet in diameter, making this high-pitched whining noise. It was on the ground right above it, and there were two huge Bigfoot creatures in the field at the same time. And it gets stranger and stranger. The whole thing I wrote up in my Silent Invasion book, which goes into great detail. And then it got even more interesting over the years when I found out that these mystery men showed up afterwards to interview the key witness.
You mean the Men in Black?
Well, they were intriguing, apparently, according to him, because one man was in a dark suit, the other man was in an Air Force uniform.
That is really intriguing. I've never heard anything like that, but wow. Here's one thing, I hear, because I had my encounter of Bigfoot. I have my feelings, my own feelings. But there's so many people that go vanishing in the woods. You know that. People out hiking, hunters, people just disappearing. Now, of course, again, if you break a leg out there, you'll disappear, undoubtedly. But, I mean, there is people vanishing. And maybe, again, we can't say all Bigfoot are going to attack humans or dogmen or what have you. But this, even like this trucker, he said who shot this dogman, he said that when he got out of his rig, that dogman was going to attack him. So he that's when he pulled his gun out and shot it in the head, in the eye. So it tells me that some of these creatures are aggressive. Again, maybe the people that didn't survive their encounter with one of these cryptids that was aggressive. I don't know, but it's been going on too long. It's been going before the internet. It's been going long before newspapers, and it's going on worldwide. So something is happening, Stan.
Oh, there's no doubt. And there's, again, just from the increase in activity that I saw in Pennsylvania last year, and I was in touch with a lot of other researchers, and I heard other parts of the country, there was also increases in UFO, UAP activity in some states as well. So, yeah, things are going on. And what was so intriguing about last year was the detail of the reports coming in. I mean, many reports in daylight of large metallic cigar-shaped objects, even in beautiful skies, that were just hovering there and just physically vanished and was gone. They didn't accelerate and leave. They just vanished. And there were the big triangle reports and other kind of reports, and of course, these many reports of these small spheres of light low the ground, and then all the cryptid cases, which we didn't even talk about. And I mean, it's just, it was an amazing time period.
And it still is. That's, like again, Washington State, on one of their cams up in the mountain pass, captured what appeared to be a Bigfoot. I mean, we need proof. Somebody told me the other day, Stan, when I told them you were going to be on the show, that all these people that investigate cryptids and UFOs, they're all full of cocky pot. And he said, well, Gary, haven't you ever noticed that their pictures are out of focus and all this? And I said, look, when I had my encounter with a Bigfoot. I had a camera around my neck. I didn't even think about taking a picture. But when they encounter something that's terrifying, because it is terrifying, your brain goes in a protective mode. Trust me. And you don't think about, oh, gee, I got a cell phone. I'm gonna just take it and take a picture. You think of one thing. You want to get out of there.
Oh, yeah, and again, that's very common, what you just described. I mean, so many of the incidents, whether it's a Bigfoot or some other cryptid or even a close-range UFO, many of these incidents only last seconds. So many of the witnesses are just amazed and so shocked by what they saw, and many of them had the cameras laying there, and they told me that they didn't even think about taking a picture. However, there's another aspect of this. I've had incidents more and more over the years and in recent years where people had their cameras, they encountered a very large object, very close range. They attempted to take the pictures, and their cameras malfunctioned at the moment they did it and was fine afterwards. And we get these electromagnetic cases reported. This is something, again, with Bigfoot most people never heard about. You know, you're familiar, Gary, with some of these UFO reports from probably the 40s and 50s of these large solid objects pacing vehicles hovering overhead, and sometimes there was a power loss, or the headlights would dim and the object would take off and everything would come back on. Well, very few people have ever heard of this, but there are EM cases with power loss with Bigfoot as well. So I've investigated a case where a Bigfoot walked out near a vehicle, and when the creature was nearby, the car began to lose power, the creature moved off, and the power came back on normal.
Well, I believe it. Again, I think, I think other parallel universes exist. I think parallel, openings, all this stuff can happen, so portals open up, all this stuff. I think whatever they are, maybe in some ways they're more advanced than we are. I don't know. Our time is virtually up. Now, can you share your latest books and where they can find them?
Sure. Well, people can go to my website, which is stangordon.info, I-N-F-O, and they can read a real detailed report of what happened last year on my website now. All my books, my latest book is Creepy Cryptids and Strange UFO Encounters of Pennsylvania. It's got a lot of much more detailed accounts of some of the strange things I've been uncovering. There are many cryptid case things on there that I can almost guarantee people have never heard of before. A lot of very interesting of these small ball light reports and UFOs. Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO casebook, goes into great detail about these strange cases of the 70s when I began to realize there was more to Bigfoot than unknown animal. Astonishing Encounters of Pennsylvania's Unknown Creatures in Really Mysterious Pennsylvania. They're all available on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. And if you go to my website, there's email and telephone contact numbers on there that they can reach out to me.
Well, please do if you ever had any of those encounters. You want me to forward here tomorrow over that letter I got from the father and the son about the dogman? I think you might find that very interesting because it's a couple pages long.
I'd be glad to read it. It sounds very intriguing. I'd like to take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was rather them than me. Well, Stan, again, I want to wish you a happy 2023, and hopefully this year is going to be better than 2022, and I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me back on, Gary, and we're already getting some interesting cases in 2023, so we'll look forward to see what the year brings. Okay, my friend, you take care, will you? Right, thank you, and you too. 73, Steve. Right, good night. Night. Well, JC, who is our guest tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow, Randy Kramer is coming on. Randy Kramer, of course, was part of the 20 years and back to Mars and the secret Space Force mission, so he's going to be on talking about, well, that kind of stuff and more. And his background, he was a captain in the United States Marine Corps, too. So very credible person. So we're going to talk about, the secret Space Force. Do you believe that we have one and had one for many years? And Anthony, the attorney that claims that he was in the secret Space Force and being transported as a kid to Mars and all that stuff, isn't he coming on here shortly? Yeah, actually, he'll be coming on, I think, toward late to mid-February, yes. And we're going to be talking more about the secret Space Force and some other stuff. Oh, yeah. All kind of, listen, oh, man, every time he's on, yeah, he's going to touch base on that, too.
Yeah, very interesting person too. I mean, very credible. He, like I said, he's a long-term attorney. He ran for U.S. president back a few years ago. Again, we're very interesting about what he did as a kid, where his father actually didn't give him any choice to get into the secret Space Force and do time travel and go back to when Lincoln was being assassinated and all that stuff. Also in the news, they're saying now we're very, very, very close to go forward in time, and they now can believe that we can go backward in time and forward in time. Before, it was only back in time, we couldn't go forward.
Yeah, I've seen there's all kind of new advancements in science here in the last week or two. You're right, all kind of things coming for sure.
How about longevity too? They're talking about that they've been injected this stuff into mice, and it doubles the life of the mice semen. They have actually injected into mice that were on their last days, and it regenerated all their cells.
Regenerate them, and it's like a fountain of youth too. It's like it renewed it, and they're young again.
Well, do you want to be young again? It reminds me of Twilight Zone. You remember the Twilight Zone, the series where the episode where there was an older guy. He was very wealthy, and he was buying people's years off of them. And people would sell them like 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, and they would age instantly, where this guy would be regressing and become younger.
Yeah, he's going to end up like that movie. He's going to end up being a little infant, going backwards. But yeah, that was a crazy show. That was a crazy episode.
Yeah, would you want to give up 5 or 10 years of your life? I don't think I'd want to.
No, I'm sure. Especially this late in the game, that could be everything.
Of course, if somebody wants to sell me about 20 years, make me 20 years younger, you can go to nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. I can give you 2 cents on the dollar. That's what I'm worth. But, I would like to, get 20 years younger. Or would I? Yes, I would.
Well, make up your mind, Martha.
Well, what did you say, Dave?
You're funny.
Oh, but yeah, my wife said that the other day when she saw me in my boxers. She goes, you're getting bow-legged. And I said, well, God, I'm in my 70s. What do you want me to look like when I was in my 20s? Well, my boyfriend looks good, and he's in his 20s.
Oh, my goodness. Maybe he got some scurvy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Nowadays, the way people eat, I'm surprised that hasn't been broke out again.
Seeing how you've been out to sea for so long,
Yeah, a lot of people, I know people don't eat any fruits or anything. They just eat meat and all that stuff and mashed potatoes. I won't say who. There's one person that's always putting it up on Facebook. They're cooking steaks all the time and barbecuing steaks and roasts and pork chops. I never see them eat vegetables or fruits. So, the perfect case of maybe getting it down the road.
I think I know who you're talking about.
It starts with a W?
Yeah.
William, right? William. Let's leave it as that.
Some of those look so picture perfect, like you'd see it in a magazine. They look so good.
I warned him. I said, one of these days you're going to have a massive heart attack and you're not going to be here. You can't eat that much meat on a constant basis without doing damage to your body. And, I don't know. I'm not going to argue with anybody. Also, who is our guest on Sunday?
Oh, Sunday we got Dr. Richard Allen Miller coming back on. So listen, every time he's on, it's always a very entertaining show.
You need to send me his picture and bio again.
Okay.
Okay, you got to do that. Yeah, he is always interesting. When he gets on, I tell you, our listenership just goes sky. But I don't know what he's talking about sometimes because he is so intelligent. He has all these degrees and all this stuff. But 1 minute he's talking about something, and 10 seconds later he's talking about something else. And then when you start figuring out what he's talking about, he's already into the next subject.
Yeah, he's going to try to, I believe, talking about, the multiverse or maybe some of the prepping you can do for growing stuff.
Well, we'll try that. We'll start out multiverse, and we're going to talk about children with water, okay?
Gotcha.
Okay, well, till tomorrow, everybody have a good one. I want to thank Stan Gordon for coming on the show. I want to thank Rory, Kim, and Barbara, and everybody else that's been on chat here tonight. World Bigfoot Radio. Also, I want to thank you guys. You just came on a little late. Well, till tomorrow, everybody have a good one. Give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. Don't forget, we have the strange news on every day at noon. You can go on to any of the radio apps and listen to it, or you can even listen to it on YouTube. That's called The Strange News, brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side of the coin. Of course, my coin is double-sided.